we're really excited about this one because we're not giving it. As most people know, we have an incredibly large and talented and dedicated core of volunteers here at the Arboretum. And so for this month's tour, we asked one of our longest serving and most dedicated groups of volunteers if they would be willing to give a tour for us. And they said yes. So we have the Border Babes, who are self-named. We did not name them the Border Babes, but they take care of our mixed border, and they'll, I'm sure, talk a little bit about what a mixed border is and what they do there. But I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Lori, Carol, and Jean, a small group of the Border Babes that will be leading us out there and talking about the plants.
Everybody's here. Okay. Hi, I'm Lori Cochran. I've been a member of the Border Babes for 27 years. Our leader is Amelia Lane. She is on a Rock Garden Society trip in Turkey, so that's why she's not here. But I'm joined by Jean Andrews and Carol Williams. Janelle is here, but she's not discussing plants. And Lisa is another of our members who couldn't be here. And there's a couple other ladies who join us occasionally, but we're the core team. So the first plant I want to talk about is this tree here, or sometimes it's a large shrub. This is Cornus Moss variegata. And another name is the variegated cornelian cherry. Now, Cornus is dogwood, so this is in the dogwood species, and the plant is native to France, to the Republic of Georgia, past Ukraine, what used to be a Soviet republic. I like this tree because of its multi-season interest. In the winter, you get a shaggy bark on the older trees and a multi-branching structure, big rounded canopy. And then in the spring, it starts this show of small clusters of yellow flowers on very short stems. The flowers are supposed to produce a berry. Mark, do you know if this one ever gets fruit?
This particular one does not get fruit often. It's you only need one plant for fruit, but like most fruiting trees, if you have a couple of different ones growing nearby, they fruit better.
Right. Well, if it gets fruit, they are about 5/8 of an inch long, reddish, orange red in color. That's why it's called a cornelian cherry. And some of the benefits, like the flowers are a good source of nectar and pollen for the bees that are just waking up now. Later in the spring, just in a few weeks, the leaves will start to come out. And I wore my dogwood shirt today, but it was a little chilly. Cornus moss is not on this, but you can see the shape of a dogwood leaf, the elliptical shape. And on this one, variegata, the margins are bright white, and then in the center is a splotch of green that to me almost looks like the shape of a leaf. It's a toothed green shape. It's very pretty. But because of the white edges of these leaves, this tree stands out in the landscape when there's dark green around it. It's just a lovely specimen. In the summer, when the fruits are on the tree, it's covered in berries, and there are lots of uses for the berries, which I'll discuss in a minute. The fall may or may not have good color. I don't honestly remember if this one colors up well or not, but I think it's spring and summer are the highlights of this tree. This particular tree, well, zones 4 to 8A is what it likes to grow in. Average, well-drained soil. It can tolerate some clay, but I read that the roots should be mulched in the heat of the summer. This particular tree was received in 1995 and planted in 1996, so it's an old one. been here longer than I have. In February of 2012, it was measured to be 12 feet tall, and now we're 12 years later, so, you know, this is up a little higher than, but you can see the height. I think that's about the average size that they get. Some interesting things I learned about the name, variegated cornelian cherry. Cornelian, the word cornel is another word for dogwood. So that's one reason it was called that. Also, there's a gem called carnelian, and that's a red, orange-red gemstone. So sometimes it's spelled cornelian, so they think that may be why it's the cornelian cherry. Some interesting details about the berries. They're edible, but tart. But if you Google cornelian cherry, you can find syrup and preserves. They are in other places, they make use of them a lot. They juice them as a soft drink in Ukraine. Russia has even found that, well, this is talking about medicinal uses, that the fruit of the flesh can leach radiation from the body. So it has a lot of uses. The seeds are full of oil, so they use that for lamp oil. It's also made into a liqueur in Turkey, so I don't know if Amelia will be testing that, but
Bring us back, so.
I also, the name cornus for dogwood means horn, which is thought to be because it's hard and dense, and that's what the wood is on a dogwood, and it's used for making utensil handles, utensils, spears. And there are a lot of uses for the dogwood in history. And some medicinal uses over the years. There were many, many, but I'll just name a few. To treat sore throat, digestion issues, measles, chicken pox, and diabetes. So if you're into medicinal use, plant this tree. Okay, any questions about the cornus moss?
Have you done a lot of pruning on it?
We probably limbed it up because that's what we do in the border when we're kind of don't have a lot of space and we need space underneath. It looks like it's either a multi-stemmed shrub or it can be a small tree, but I think, you know, this one obviously looks like it's been limbed up. But no, not now, unless something's sticking me in the eye. I'll cut it off. Okay. Now Carol's going to talk about plant down here.
This is an Elysium, also called a Chinese anise, and I picked this tree because I didn't like it at all. It was unpleasant to look at. It was overgrown. There were vines that always encroached it. We spend hours pulling the vines out, and finally one day it dawned on us, why don't we just clean it underneath? So that's what we did. So think about that shrub or in your yard that you don't really like it too much. Maybe you could reinvent it a little. So that's what we did in early winter. You can see how we cut it way up. And now it created a whole new planting space for us. Plus you can see the structure of the tree. And also now you can see that we have started planting behind it, which before nobody noticed. So think about reusing something you already have and just redefining it into something else. This is evergreen, it's woody, it's hardy. Average size is 10 feet. And it started life at the Arboretum in 1995 in an 8-inch pot. Gradually, it kept being upsized into something larger. And it was planted as a 2-gallon pot in 2000. So now it's one of my most favorites after being on my hit list for a long time. So do you have any questions? Yes.
Color of the bloom?
It's very, well, to me, mark color. I mean, I don't think it really,
Pale pink.
pale pink. Okay. So, see, I didn't even remember how much it bloomed. But we're now thinking about what else we can add under here just to change it even more. So, underneath. Anything else? So go home and trim something. That's my motto.
Limit up.
Okay, this one is called Pinus densiflora vibrant. It's a dwarf Japanese red pine, and if this were a Wednesday, we'd be out here doing this. Cleaning it off. This is a rare seedling from a witch's broom, and the dwarf red pines are native to Japan, Korea, China, and Southeast Russia. It's generally a low, rounded evergreen shrub. If you read about it, it'll say to 5 feet, which maybe in 10 years. This one is 20 years old or close to it. This one came in 2005 and was planted in 2006. In 2014, at age 9 years, it was 5 feet. So it just continues to grow slowly, but it's, what I like about it is the shape. This winter, we spent some time pruning out at that time, the dead little branches like this. And we just snipped those off and cleared out the leaves, and it opened it up. So to me, it looks like almost like a big bonsai tree in the border. I just think it's a lovely dark green color, and it's just a beautiful plant. It has dark green 2.5-inch needles, and then the candles are brown and pointed. One thing about this particular plant, there is a pest that you can get. It's a red pine sawfly, and we have had it a few times, so we look for it. They're very sneaky because they stand up and look like a clump of needles, and so you have to really look for them. They're green, and anyway, when we find them, we just pull them off and put them in a bucket of water or somehow get rid of them.
Maureen, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
I don't mean to interrupt, but I will. Will you explain to some of us what a witch's broom is?
No.
No, but Greg can.
Mark or Greg?
So the question was, what is a witch's broom? And if you've ever seen Harry Potter, that's what a witch's broom is. It's usually witch's brooms you see in conifers primarily. And when you are plant nerds like we are, you're kind of trained to spot them driving 70 miles an hour down an interstate. You'll catch them out of the corner of your eye. But nurserymen look for them in conifers. And usually it's really, really tight growth, almost ball-like. So it does kind of look like a witch's broom, like the end of a witch's broom. I'm not sure exactly why it got that moniker, but you usually see them in conifers of all types, pines quite a bit. And for whatever reason, that genetic material is really good for propagating. If you want something dwarf or compact like this, you know, in nature, the straight species can get quite large. So that's where what that term is when we're talking about it. Thank you for asking that.
Okay, thank you.
That's a good point. Thinking that, I'll repeat what she said. Many years ago, if you didn't understand what something was, it had to have been caused by some supernatural force. So you're probably exactly right. That's probably where that came from. Next one.
I just wanted to say that they like full sun, dry to average soil, and well drained, as most pines do. Trish.
Looks cloud prune. Is that its natural form?
Well, it wasn't, we didn't.
The question was, has it been cloud pruned? And that's a style of pruning for, you see in Japanese gardens and other Asian gardens, where you actually try to mimic parts of the plant to, parts of the plant to look like clouds. And I think this is just tight because of the characteristics.
And because we removed all the dead
Right.
areas, and it's what it ended up. Wasn't intentional cloud pruning, but it's what it looks like. So this large shrub, you may not recognize as a Mahonia, but it is. It's called the slender Mahonia or the graceful Mahonia. The leaves do not have sharp anything. It's soft and you can touch it. This is Mahonia gracilis. It's in the barberry family. It's called Mexican barberry, native to central and northern Mexico. Like sun to part shade, up to 8 feet, but this one's a little bit bigger. It's been here a while. In the spring, it is covered with these yellow flowers, and they are extremely sweetly fragrant. And we're passing a branch around for you to smell, but it's just a lovely fragrance. So that's why it's one of our favorites in the border. This particular plant, I don't know when it came in, but in 2014, it was 8 feet tall, and that's 10 years ago. The accession number was XX something, so what does that mean? Before a long time ago. I read that Yucadú Nursery in Texas was instrumental in getting this plant distributed because it's not very common and it's hard to propagate. It can be propagated with cuttings or maybe layering, but I was reading it was difficult to propagate this particular Mahonia, and Tony Avent referred to it as a favorite winter blooming Mahonia. So if you want to come and get a better smell of the whole shrub or touch it, please do that. And then we're going to move around to the rain garden and then come back to the magnolia.
Okay. Waiting for the train. Get out of the way. Okay. So switching from shrubs and trees, want to focus your attention on this evergreen plant that's called an Acorus gramineus. The cultivar is Ogon. You may know it as variegated sweet flag. This is an award-winning evergreen plant that's not a true grass. It's very easy to take care of. It's disease and it's pest free. And rabbits will not eat it, and I can testify to that because I have it in my yard and they have not touched it. And it's not invasive, which a lot of ground covers, particularly grasses like liriope and mondo grass, can be very invasive. And I have not found this to be invasive at all. It spreads very slowly and it spreads by rhizomes. And I've got a picture here of the one that's in my yard because it's a miniature version of this one. And the name of the one I have in my yard is, okay, get this, Acorus gramineus minimus aureus. And that's the name. And I'll pass it around so you can see it's half the size of this. So you can get an even smaller size. And I have it planted in and amongst my paver stones. And it makes a really lovely little border around the paver stones. It highlights where the pathway is, and it's just as tough as it can be. It's one of the few things that you can grow that looks kind of like a grass that loves wet locations. Hence, that's why it's in the rain garden. But it will also adapt to average moisture. Where my path is, it is not boggy and wet, but it's thriving beautifully along that path. It can take sun to part shade, and it's a zone 5 to 10, so lots of people can use this. It's a very, very friendly plant to have in your yard. It transplants easily also. You can take plugs of it, and which I've done with what I have at home, just go in with a soil knife and cut a little plug of it and put it where I want it, water it in, and it does beautifully. It has a nickname which is called Old Faithful, which I thought was kind of neat. That's it that I have, the information I have on it. Anybody have any questions? This one is a variegated one. The one I have, that the picture I'm passing around, is not variegated. That I can see. You can't see the variegation if it's there, but it is a really bright yellow like this one. Yes, ma'am.
Does it die back at all?
It does not. It's evergreen. That's why I love it and use it around my path. It will get a little, in a really hot summer. You shouldn't really have it in full sun all day long, but it will get some brown tips to it if we're in a drought. But in the winter, it just looks fine all winter long, even after we've had a snow or a hard freeze. It still looks great. Yes, ma'am.
I have some growing in a couple inches of water in lake, and that gets pretty close to full sun, so I think it's okay in full sun if it gets
Enough water. You're right. And you can use it in container gardening also. It's beautiful in container gardening. You don't have to worry about it taking over. Like most container gardens, there are thugs that want to take over the other nice little plants, and this one stays very tame and in its place. Okay, Carol?
Well, I chose this magnolia goldfinch. It's a hybrid, and the origin is here at JCRA. This was one of the very first things I helped to plant when I first started as a volunteer 13 years ago this month. So I was impressed that I was going to be planting a tree. So I love how it shows up against the blue sky. The blooms have a very little bit of a fragrance, not much. And it's just as beautiful to me in the winter as it is now when we have our blooms, or then when the leaves start to come on. When you get close, the bark has a lot of patterns in the bark, and I love patterns. And this one was planted in a 10-gallon pot in 2012. Last time it was measured was 2013, and it was 9 feet tall. It is hardy. And do you have any questions on this one? And it's amazing because I think the things I've learned while volunteering in the border, then I go home and I go to plant a tree and I'll think, I've done this before. I know how to do this. You know, how deep the hole should be and how wide it should be. And I just feel like this is like my little child. So I love watching it throughout the year.
Head over that way? To the Daphne?
Yep.
To the Daphne.
Okay. And I'm sorry, I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Jean Andrus, and I've been working in the mixed border with these ladies you and I came in probably the same time, yeah, close to 30 years, somewhere around there. And this is a Daphne. Might not be one that you have seen in the nurseries. This one is Transatlantica, Daphne Transatlantica, and it's called Jim's Pride. As most Daphnes, it's an evergreen small shrub, and in our zone, it stays evergreen. The further north you go, sometimes it can lose its leaves, but it's considered in our zone to be evergreen all year round. They generally get to about 3 to 4 feet tall and wide, so they're a great shrub for the home gardener. If you don't like to prune and you want something that's going to fit in a backyard somewhere near where there's a porch where you can smell the fragrance from the flowers when they're blooming. This one, Jim's Pride, is not as floriferous as some of the other cultivars, but true for all Daphnes, there is fragrance in the flowers. It likes full sun to part shade, and it has to have good drainage. And it has a very slow growth rate, so that's why it's a great shrub choice for a home gardener in a small yard. Some of the other different varieties are the Daphne odora, which is called the winter Daphne, Daphne burkwoodii, which has brighter variegation. You can see this one doesn't have a lot of variegation, but the burkwoodii does have a real pretty creamy yellow variegation down the center of the leaf. And it is is really, I have 2 of them blooming now in my yard. One, as I drive out the driveway, it's sort of where I turn to go out the driveway, and I roll my window down because I can smell it the minute I get in my car from the garage. So it fragrances large spaces. Anybody have any questions about the Daphne? Yes.
Do you know where you can get this particular Daphne? I've never seen it in any.
I haven't either. I don't know. And the guy, Greg, you want to speak to that?
The question was, where can you get the Daphne?
Jim's Pride.
Daphne can be a little bit difficult to propagate. They like to go south really quickly, meaning they die for no apparent reason, and so that they've been hard to propagate. There's a bunch of these in the Lath House that are much easier to find, but for whatever reason, this is one that's not real easy to find. I always tell people to check mail order sources. I think Camellia Forest on occasion will grow these, and you'll see them there. I'm trying to think of some of the mail order companies that are still around.
Nurseries Caroliniana, maybe?
Nurseries Caroliniana would have it on occasion.
I have seen this locally. I know I saw it at Homewood Nursery.
Homewood Nursery, Mark just said, carries it. And we like to promote our local folks. I always say check there first. Check your local nursery, your garden center first, and sometimes they can find stuff too.
Could you speak to, and I couldn't really find anything definitive on the sudden death syndrome of Daphne? Because I've heard this now. All of my Daphne are fine. I haven't lost any Daphne, but I hear it from a lot of other gardeners that they just up and died. They'd had it for years and it up and died.
I think some of it is harsh language. If you talk bad around it, they get offended. I've also been told don't make eye contact with Daphnes. They don't like that side of plant health care.
People bragging about never having killed one either. So
yes,
I know. I'm worried about that now.
I famously sold. We had these at a plant sale when I was at the Scott Arboretum, and was telling somebody that this was a problem. And while I was talking about it, somebody that had bought them on the first day of the plant sale took them home and they died. So they're, nobody knows. They're very sensitive to root-borne diseases. They're very sensitive to poor soils. In some instances, they're very sensitive to being overwatered. They like the drainages should be good for most of them, and of course, there's always exceptions. I know voles will eat the roots off of them, and that stresses them out and causes other issues. But I think if you plant at the right depth, you take all the cultural practices, you don't make eye contact with them, I think you're going to do okay.
Very good drainage, I'm hearing you say.
Yep.
I did also want to mention that they are considered toxic to pets and people. So if you have a big dog that likes to chew on shrubs, you might not want to choose a Daphne, but I personally have never had any issues with the Daphne when I've been, but you don't prune them very much, that's the thing. But the times that I've cleaned up or even cleaned up around them, I always wear gloves anyway, but they recommend that, if you're worried about it, be sure you wear your gloves when you're working around Daphne. Any other questions?
Okay, the next is this tree here. Okay, this is a large tree for the mixed border, and I love it. It's called Cercidophyllum morioka weeping. Morioka is a city in Japan. It is a weeping Katsura, Katsura, not Kadsura like the vine. Related to magnolias, native to Japan and central and eastern China. Is deer resistant, although once it gets to this size, probably doesn't matter. I don't know when this came into the Arboretum, but I would imagine it's 30 years old or so. It has a graceful shape with very long, pendulous branches that hang down in this weeping form. The leaves are heart-shaped, and that's why it's called Cercidophyllum, but it's not related to Cercis redbud. It just looks like that, but it's not at all in the same family. The leaves are opposite on the branch, and they start out reddish purple and then turn a blue-green. So in the summer, this is just hanging with lovely leaves. The fall color is yellow with some orange. And I read that, I don't know that we've noticed this, but sometimes the fallen leaves will smell like caramel or cotton candy or strawberries, and that's because of the high sugar content in the leaves. It's a zone 4 to 8 plant. It likes full sun to light shade. It likes rich, well-drained soil, and it needs regular watering. But we don't really do anything special to this except remove the occasional dead limb. But it's just a lovely shape. Any questions about Cercidophyllum? Okay, the next plant, we're going to go around on the path this direction.
Guess we didn't think about this many people having to get around it, but everybody good? Yep. Okay. I know you recognize hellebores. If you don't, these are a workhorse of a beautiful winter plant. This particular one that I love is a hellebore ericsmithii pirouette. I just love the coloration in it, the lighter pink when the blooms open, and the dark on the back side of the leaf, and the blue-green foliage, which even on the back side of the foliage, you get that purpley coloration on the back side of the foliage. And it is evergreen foliage, so you'll have that. You will have some dieback on some of the older foliage, but it stays pretty and green almost all year round. Another wonderful thing about hellebores is they're considered very low maintenance. The only maintenance you really, and you don't even have to do this, is around November or December, you go and you trim off some of the old brown leaves around the bottom so that you'll be able to see the new bloom shoots when they come up a little bit better. But that's really, and divide. If it gets to be too thick of a area and you want to move some to another spot, that's really the only maintenance that they need. It likes well drained. It can take sun to part shade, and I have some of mine are in even heavy shade in my woodland garden, and they still do well. Part shade is preferred in our climate zone. There are zones 5 to 9. And you may have heard their common name is Lenten rose. And the way it got its name, Lenten rose, is because they traditionally bloom during the season of Lent. I have one cultivar, I'm trying to remember the name of one of the ones I have that's white. It actually starts opening around Christmas time. And I've lost the tag, as a lot of us do lose tags, to know which one that particular one is. But they do come in many colors, whites, light pinks, yellows. Some are green. The blooms are green, lighter chartreuse green, and they stay green. And I would recommend highly, if you love hellebores, making a trip to Pine Knot Farms to their open house. It's already been, hasn't it? Yeah, it's already been for this spring. But be sure and put that on your to-do list for next spring. It's in February, mid-February.
The last 2 weekends in February.
Last 2 weekends in February. To go to Pine Knot Farms, you'll be overwhelmed. Let's just put it that way. Any questions? Anybody want to add anything? Okay. Let's move on down this stone path and towards the opening area back there. When we checked this last week, it had all of its pretty copper colored, I call it fringe. But as you can see, what 1 week did, and especially with the wind that we had, those couple of really windy days, it blew off most of the, they almost look like crepe paper to me, the little blooms for this Hamamelis. This one is called, it's Jelena. Is that correct? Jelena. And the common name is Copper Beauty Witch Hazel. It's very fragrant when it's in bloom. It is deciduous. And as you heard me say, it was in full bloom a week ago, so it probably actually started opening maybe even 3 weeks before that. And when it's in full bloom, it's absolutely stunningly beautiful with the copper color, especially when the light hits it. And they're long, very long, and the best way I can describe them is crepe paper, like petals on this flower. It's a great understory plant, and as you can see, it spreads, it's wider than it is tall, which is one of the reasons why it does make a good understory plant. It does prefer sun, so you can see it's under a deciduous tree, which still allows it to get lots of sun during its blooming time. Its value for a transition zone to separate a cultivated landscape from the undisturbed wildland. So it's great along an edge, I guess, a border, if you will, of where maybe you have a lawn and you start into a wooded area. It's a great transition for that. And this wood, the Hamamelis, or witch hazel, has a real high tannin content, and it's been used in the cosmetics industry as an old-fashioned astringent. And you know it as witch hazel. The Native Americans used it in dozens of their remedies and used it also as a coagulant. It can have some pests and disease issues, however, so I will warn you about that. Japanese beetles do like it. It can have issues with powdery mildew and leaf spot, but not typically serious. And if it's sited correctly, where it gets good air circulation and good sunlight, you really shouldn't have too much problems with this. It's pretty tough. This has been here as long as I've been working here, so almost 30 years. Be sure you plant in well-draining soil, and it's best in full sun.
This is a juniperus, and it is called Silver Sheen. And if you notice how it does shine when it's in the sun, and it's beautiful though all year long. So the colors will slightly change throughout the year. It does spread. We started with 6 plants here that were in 3-inch pots. And this has been in the ground for 3 years. And then we have the peonies coming up in the middle. We have been talking about what we're going to put on this edge around the back, because we've just trimmed this. It was a problem because it kept encroaching over here to the path. So another example of, the Border Babes trim constantly. This is native to the United States and Canada. It will get 6 inches tall, and it can spread up to 40 inches. But like I said, there are 6 plants that we put in here in this spot. And it is hardy to a zone 4. It's an evergreen foliage with woody stems. It makes a great ground cover for an area. And we have a problem because a lot of people like to cut through the path. And I'm sure that people step on this, but it manages to survive people walking over the edges. Do you have any questions?
Carol, I read that this particular plant, Silver Sheen, is often mislabeled or sold as Silver Sheen, but it's not, and that this may be a very rare example of the actual Silver Sheen.
So, yes.
There are a lot of horizontales that look similar, but this one with this lovely color is what's unique about it.
Yeah, and sometimes it has more of a purple glow, or it looks blue, depending on the sunlight and the shadows. Sometimes it You know, just the silver. So it constantly, to me, it's constantly changing with the appearance. Or even if you walk from the path from that direction to this direction, the colors will change as you face it coming from another direction. Any questions? Yes.
Does the color change in the winter?
Not too much. I don't think, not that I remember.
Some junipers, some do.
Mm-hmm.
Just wondering.
So, any other questions? So maybe on your tours, you don't usually make it this far to the end of the border, but our border keeps going, so we have one more move. We've lost a few people who are stopping to admire the beautiful border along their way. As you can see, the color is what attracts me to this plant. This is a gold bark Japanese maple, Acer palmatum, and it has no leaves, it has no blooms, but it's still very beautiful at this time of the year. And on some days when we come to work in this area, if the sun hits it just right, it almost glows with that yellow color. Just when you think winter's not going to end and you come across a plant like this and it kind of lifts your spirits. It is deciduous and it likes sun to part shade. This was planted in 2017 in a 1-gallon pot. And it can grow 10 to 15 feet tall. I don't know that this one will because it's competing with so many other large plants, taller things around it, but we'll just have to see. And as you look at the bark changes from the bottom up towards the top. So there's more of a red, orangey tinge on some of them than the yellow. Any questions? Yes.
Do you know what color it is in the fall?
This one I think is yellows and oranges, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of a show place for us because we've got all the construction behind us and the fences and the noise of the belt line. So this survives right here, even with all that competition.
Okay, well, let's give our volunteers a big old round of applause. That was absolutely wonderful.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you for coming. We'll get
Yeah, they said when we do this, 2 or 3 people will come. It's okay. And then 2 days before, they said, "Oh, did we even tell you that we record that?" No.